I woke up to the kind of skull-splitting pain that felt like someone was trying to pry my head open with a crowbar. This wasn't a hospital. The air didn't have that clean, antiseptic bite. Instead, it was a cool, expensive, woodsy scent, mingled with a woman's perfume, filling my nose. The sheets beneath me were silk, so smooth they felt unnerving. In the next second, a flood of memories that weren't mine crashed over me, a tidal wave threatening to drown my own consciousness. My name was Ethan Vance, and I was the contract husband of Isabella Thorne, the untouchable CEO of Thorne Industries and the most beautiful woman in Sterling City. A complete and utter doormat. The final memory was the worst. It was of Isabella's old flame returning from Europe. The two of them had teamed up to torture and humiliate me, this inconvenient piece of trash in their perfect story, before having me beaten to death in a rain-slicked alley. And Isabella, the woman who orchestrated it all, only realized her true feelings after I was dead, a sudden, dramatic awakening that kicked off a story of tragic, regretful love. To hell with her regret. You're awake. A voice, as cold and sharp as ice, cut through the silence. I lifted my head and saw her. Isabella, dressed in a perfectly tailored Chanel power suit that hugged a body made from magazine covers. Her long hair was pinned back in a severe, elegant bun, revealing a flawless brow and the delicate line of her collarbone. She looked down at me from beside the bed, her beautiful, almond-shaped eyes filled with an undisguised disgust, like she was staring at something nauseating she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. Thwack! A file folder hit me in the face, the edge of the paper stinging my cheek. Sign it, she commanded, her voice laced with extreme impatience. The money's already in your account. Take it and get the hell out of my house. Divorce papers. I didn't move. I just leaned back against the headboard and watched her, this woman whose face the author had described with a mountain of breathless prose. So this was the high and mighty CEO. Even the air she breathed seemed to carry an icy don't-touch-me vibe. When I didn't respond, Isabella's brow tightened. Don't play dead. You're wasting my time. Or is it not enough money for you? I suddenly laughed. In the dead silent bedroom, where the only other sound was the clicking of her heels, my laugh was jarring. I didn't reach for the papers. Instead, I shifted into a more comfortable position, lounging against the pillows and looking at her with a playful glint in my eye. So eager to get rid of me? Let's see. By my calculations, your old flame isn't even back in the country yet, is he? The look on Isabella's face froze solid. She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, a flicker of genuine shock in those cold eyes. For the past 3 years, Ethan Vance had never done anything but stare at the floor in her presence, too timid to even breathe too loudly. The shock quickly gave way to a towering rage. You've been investigating me? Do I need to? I chuckled, pushing myself up to sit on the edge of the bed. You wear your intentions all over your face. Ethan, don't push your luck, she seethed, her cheeks flushed with anger as she pointed a finger at me. Who do you think you are? Don't you know with one phone call, I can make sure you never work in this city again? I can show you what it really means to hit rock bottom. The smile on my face widened. I slowly picked up the divorce papers she'd thrown at me. Under her furious gaze, I leisurely, deliberately tore them into pieces. The shreds of paper fluttered down like snowflakes, a few landing on her impossibly expensive heels. You want a divorce? I looked up, meeting her blazing eyes, and said, word by word, fine. But you're not the one calling the shots anymore. From now on, I make the rules. You have a death wish. Isabella was thoroughly enraged. She took a step back and yelled toward the door. Security, get this lunatic out of my sight. The door flew open and 2 burly men in black suits rushed in, making a beeline for me without a word. Isabella crossed her arms, watching coldly, no doubt picturing the satisfying image of me being dragged out like garbage. In the next second, however, her eyes widened in shock. Just as the first guard's hand was about to grab me, I moved. My body reacted faster than my mind could process. A swift sidestep dodged his hold, and I slammed my elbow back into his ribs. As the second man stared in momentary confusion, I drove my foot into his kneecap. Thump! Thump! 2 muffled groans. 2 200-pound men, one clutching his side, the other his knee, were crumpled on the floor. The whole thing took less than 3 seconds. Silence fell over the bedroom again. I stood up from the bed, smoothed the wrinkles from my shirt, and rolled my wrists. Not bad, I thought to myself. Guess I inherited this body's latent strength. Not like the original chump who couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag. Then I walked toward the petrified Isabella. She instinctively backed away, one of her heels making an unsteady click on the hardwood floor. For the first time, her face showed an emotion I'd never seen there before, fear. I stopped right in front of her, leaning in slightly. We were so close I could smell the cool, clean scent of her hair, could see the slight tremor in her long eyelashes. I curved my lips into a smile she had never seen before. "Don't forget, Isabella," I said, my voice low, but sharp enough to slice through every layer of her pride. "Our marriage is still legally binding. As your husband, I have the right to be in any room in this house, anytime I want." I straightened up and turned toward the master suite's walk-in closet. "Oh, and by the way," I tossed over my shoulder, "I'll be sleeping in the master bedroom tonight." Behind me, I could feel Isabella, her fists clenched, her body trembling with a mixture of pure rage and humiliation. And I could feel her eyes locked on my back, a gaze that held something more than just anger. It was a new, dangerous curiosity. She probably didn't even recognize herself. I woke up whenever I felt like it, the sun slanting through the blinds and painting stripes of light on the expensive rug. I stretched, a satisfying series of pops running down my spine. I had to admit, Isabella's bed was a hell of a lot more comfortable than the futon I used to sleep on. I took a long shower and picked out a casual but well-made outfit from the massive walk-in closet. Downstairs in the dining room, a lavish breakfast was already laid out on the long table. A middle-aged man in a butler's uniform was directing the staff. When he saw me descend the stairs, everyone froze for a split second. I ignored them, walked straight to the head of the table, and sat down. "Sir," the butler began, his face a mask of professional unease. That seat was reserved exclusively for Isabella. I picked up the sterling silver fork and knife and cut into a perfectly poached egg. The yolk oozed out, a river of gold. "The hollandaise sauce today," I said calmly, as if stating a simple fact. "Too much lemon. The acidity is overpowering the butter." I dabbed my mouth with a linen napkin. "Have a chef be more careful next time." The butler and the maids exchanged bewildered looks, their astonishment practically spilling into the air. Just then, the familiar click of heels sounded from a staircase. Isabella. She'd changed into a sharp white pantsuit, her makeup immaculate, her aura on full blast. Only the faint dark circles under her eyes gave away a restless night. When she saw me sitting comfortably in her chair, her glacial expression turned arctic. She didn't make a scene, just pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down, her face a thundercloud. The atmosphere in the dining room plunged to freezing. I made serve her coffee. She took one sip, then set the cup down hard, the porcelain clattering loudly against the saucer. "Ethan, what the hell do you want?" she finally snapped, her voice tight with suppressed fury. I finished the last bite of my toast, chewed slowly, swallowed, and then finally looked up at her. To fulfill my rights and duties as a husband, I leaned back in my chair, regarding her with an infuriating sense of calm. "For instance, showing some concern for my wife's company. I hear you've been having some trouble lately." Isabella let out a short, sharp laugh, as if I'd just told the world's stupidest joke. "You? A parasite who can't even support himself wants to talk about my company. Is that right?" I picked up my napkin and wiped my fingers. "Then let's talk about Ethereum Dynamics, that German firm. It looks like the perfect acquisition, doesn't it? The tech, the patents, the market projections. Everything looks golden. You think you've hit the jackpot, don't you, Isabella?" Her face changed in an instant. She shot to her feet, her hands braced on the table as she leaned forward, staring at me. For the first time, her beautiful eyes showed raw shock and disbelief. How could you possibly? How could I possibly know? I cut her off, a cold edge to my smile. "Oh, I don't just know that. I also know that Ethereum's core patent is about to be invalidated in a lawsuit they've conveniently failed to disclose. I know their lead engineer took all their key data and jumped ship to your biggest competitor, Northlight Industries, last week. What you're about to sign isn't a contract for the future, Isabella. It's a bomb big enough to drag your entire company into the mud. With every word I spoke, her face grew paler. By the time I finished, her proud, always in control expression had shattered, leaving nothing but a fragile, horrified shell. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She just stared at me, desperately searching for any sign that I was lying. She found none. She stumbled back a step, grabbed her handbag from the sofa, and practically ran for the door, her heels clattering in a panicked, chaotic rhythm. I heard her on the phone, her voice urgent and sharp in a way I'd never heard before, almost shouting. Stop it. Stop everything with Ethereum Dynamics, right now. I want a full investigation. I want you to tear that company apart from the inside out. I picked up my coffee and took a sip. The beans were excellent today. I spent the afternoon lounging by the villa's infinity pool, mapping out the plot of this world in my head. Isabella, this supposed Ice Queen CEO, was nothing more than a tool created by the author to prop up the original story's hero. Pathetic, really. That evening, a Bentley pulled up to the villa, looking as tired as its passenger. Isabella was back. I was in the living room, reading a dense book on antitrust law. She slipped off her heels at the door and walked in barefoot. Her white suit was wrinkled, and a few strands of hair had escaped her usually perfect bun, framing a face etched with exhaustion. She stopped in front of me. Her usual cool perfume was mixed with something I'd never smelled on her before, the scent of defeat. How did you know? Her voice was raw, trembling with a shock she couldn't contain. Her team had clearly worked frantically to verify my claims, and the results had terrified her. I closed the book, tapping my finger on the cover. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I smiled. Isabella, the important thing isn't how I knew. It's that I can help you fix it. I stood up and walked over to her. We were close enough for me to see the redness in her eyes, the slight quiver of her lashes. I can help you turn this trap into an opportunity. We can even use it to take a bite out of Northlight Industries. I looked her straight in the eye and said, enunciating every word, but my help isn't free. Her body tensed. She looked up, her gaze a complex storm of emotions. What do you want? What I want is simple. I let a predatory smile touch my lips. The respect and rights a husband deserves. First, permanent use of the master bedroom. Second, full transparency on all your personal affairs. That includes when your old flame is coming back and how he plans on trying to steal my wife. Isabella's face flushed crimson with humiliation and rage. Don't be so quick to refuse, I said, taking a step back and sinking casually onto the sofa again. This acquisition involved a significant amount of capital, didn't it? If it fails, what happens to Thorn Industries' stock price? What will that board of old men do to you? You can't afford to lose this gamble, Isabella. The living room fell silent. I could see the rapid rise and fall of her chest, feel her eyes on me, a tangled mess of shame, shock, resentment, and something else she couldn't yet name. After a long time, as if it took all the strength she had, she forced out 2 words through gritted teeth. Fine, I agree. She lifted her head, and her beautiful eyes were burning with a dangerous fire. But you better be damn sure you can deliver, Ethan. If you fail, I swear I will make you pay a price 10 times more painful than anything you can imagine. It's a deal. My smile deepened. I knew, from the moment she agreed, the game had changed. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted. The seed I had planted in her mind was finally starting to sprout, and I was going to be the one to water it until it grew into something she could never hope to control. In the study, I pushed the door open to find Isabella frowning at her desk. I walked over. What are you doing in here? I placed a flash drive on the desk and slid it toward her. That's everything on Klaus, Ethereum's lead engineer. Embezzlement, affairs, even a copy of his divorce settlement. This is a file detailing Northlight Industries' internal financial vulnerabilities, enough to keep them busy for a long time. And this, I said, is the negotiation strategy one prepared for your team. It's time down to the minute. What to say, what expression to make, it's all in there. My gaze settled on her face, which was a canvas of pure shock. Follow this, and not only will you walk away clean, you'll be able to take a huge chunk out of Northlight in the process. A few days later, Thorn Industries' stock soared, hitting the limit up against all market trends. The business world of Sterling City was buzzing with the news of how Isabella Thorne had executed a masterful, textbook-style overseas acquisition, turning a rival's trap into a legendary corporate victory. Isabella came home late that night. Instead of going straight upstairs as usual, she did something unheard of. She sat down on the living room sofa. I was curled up in an armchair, watching an old black-and-white movie. Her familiar, cool perfume drifted over, mixed with the scent of red wine and late-night exhaustion. She just sat there quietly, not saying a word, just looking at me. Her expression was complicated. The pure disgust was gone, replaced by something much deeper, something I couldn't and didn't care to decipher. Finally, she spoke, her voice hoarse, tinged with a vulnerability she didn't realize was showing. "Who are you?" I tore my eyes away from the movie and looked at her. Under the soft lamplight, stripped of her daytime armor, her exquisite face was filled with confusion. I turned off the TV and walked over to her. Looking down at her, I could see the faint tremor of her eyelashes. "Maybe, Isabella," I said softly, my voice like a pinprick to the bubble of pride she lived in. "You never really knew your husband at all." I saw her flinch and quickly look away. The next day, an unwelcome guest shattered the fragile new equilibrium in our home. Julian Croft, Isabella's one that got away, the man who, in the original script, was the main cause of my demise. He strolled in wearing a bespoke white suit, his hair perfectly coiffed, a gentle, cultured smile on his face, and a massive bouquet of exotic blue roses in his hands. He immediately tried to sweep Isabella into a warm embrace. Isabella stiffened and took a half-step back, neatly avoiding the intimate gesture. "Isabella, I'm back. Did you miss me?" Julian's smile faltered for a second. In the past, a move like that would have had her melting into his arms, though he'd always kept her at a careful distance to keep her wanting more. He recovered quickly, his eyes landing on me, his polite smile failing to hide the condescending once-over he was giving me. "And who is this?" he asked, though he clearly already knew. Before Isabella could answer, I stood up from the sofa and walked over. "Ethan Vance." I introduced myself, holding out a hand. "Isabella's legal husband." Julian's smile froze. He ignored my hand and turned to Isabella, his tone mockingly dramatic. "Isabella, darling, you really must upgrade your security. You can't just let any riffraff wander in off the street." The provocation was obvious. He wanted me to lose my temper, to make a scene and look like a jealous lunatic next to his sophisticated calm. Isabella frowned, about to say something, but I just laughed. I slowly retracted my hand, shoved it in my pocket, and tilted my head. "This is my home, as Isabella's husband. I don't see why I need to explain myself to a guest." I paused, letting my eyes sweep over his rapidly souring face. "You, on the other hand, Mr. Croft, flying back into the country and making a beeline for a married woman's house. Is this just a friendly visit, or are you hoping to find out just how good the Thorne Industries legal department is?" Behind him, the butler let out an audible snort before quickly covering his mouth. Julian's face went from red to a sort of mottled purple. But the biggest surprise was Isabella. Not only was she not angry, she looked down, and I could see her lips twitching, fighting a smile that finally broke free. That smile was like a ray of sunshine, melting the frost from her face and making her brilliantly alive. Looking at her, a new thought crossed my mind. Maybe stealing the girl from the one that got away was a lot more interesting than simple revenge. Julian left in a humiliated huff. That evening, Isabella didn't hide away in her study or bedroom. She sat in the living room, dressed in a silk robe, her long hair loose over her shoulders. She looked less like a corporate shark and more like someone at home. She poured me a glass of water and handed it to me, a gesture so shocking the nearby maids nearly dropped their jaws. I took it and had a sip. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "I need you to come with me to the family estate. My grandfather wants to meet you." The Thorne estate was a sprawling, historic mansion nestled in the hills west of the city, a relic of the Gilded Age. Brick and ivy, towering gables, the air itself smelled of old money and history. Isabella's grandfather, Arthur Thorne, a formidable old man in a tailored suit, sat in the main armchair in the grand library, rolling two perfectly polished walnuts in his palm. His eyes were sharp as a hawk's, seeming to pierce right through you. "So, you're Ethan," he said, his voice a low rumble. I nodded, meeting his gaze without flinching. "It's good to meet you, sir." He didn't reply, just continued his silent, intense appraisal. Isabella was nervous beside me, her palms sweating as she tugged at the back of my jacket. I reached back, found her hand, and gave it a reassuring squeeze. It was cool to the touch. She trembled slightly, but didn't pull away. Just then a smug voice cut in. "Mr. Thorne, you can't let this act fool you. This man is nothing but a gold-digging freeloader. He's infamous for it all over Sterling City." Julian had shown up, still in one of his ridiculous white suits, a fake friendly smile plastered on his face, but his eyes were dripping with malice. He thought he could use my past to turn the old man against me. Arthur Thorne kept rolling the walnuts, not even looking up. "Is that so? Then why don't you tell me, Julian, just how is my granddaughter's husband a freeloader?" Julian lit up, launching into an exaggerated, colorful account of my last 3 years, concluding with, "A man like that isn't fit to be in the same room as Isabella. He's a disgrace to the Thorne family name." When he was finished, Arthur finally stopped moving the walnuts. He looked up, his gaze landing on me. "Ethan, is what he said true?" I smiled, let go of Isabella's hand, and took a step forward. "Yes, it is." I admitted it freely. A triumphant smirk spread across Julian's face. Isabella looked at me in disbelief. However, I continued, my eyes flicking to Julian's smug face. "I'd say that compared to a man who does nothing but gossip and stab people in the back, this freeloader at least knows the meaning of integrity." Julian's face went slack. "What kind of nonsense are you talking about?" Arthur Thorne's sharp eyes narrowed slowly, focusing on Julian. "Julian," the old man said, his voice dangerously soft, "since when does a guest have the right to pass judgment at our family's table?" The rest of the dinner was agonizing for Julian. He left looking like he'd swallowed poison. On the way back, Isabella was quiet, concentrating on driving, but the tension in the car had been replaced by a light, easy silence. The estate's parking garage was huge and dimly lit. I had just opened my door when a powerful sense of danger hit me from behind. "Here we go." A cold smile touched my lips. In a single, fluid motion, I shoved Isabella back into the driver's seat and slammed the door, hitting the lock button. "Ethan!" she yelled, pounding on the window in panic. I didn't look back. My eyes were fixed on the 7 or 8 men stepping out of the shadows, armed with steel pipes and knives. The next second, I was a blur of motion. A minute later, the garage floor was littered with groaning bodies. Inside the car, Isabella's hand was clamped over her mouth, her eyes wide with a shock that bordered on terror. I took down the last man and started to turn. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw one of them, a survivor, scrambling to his feet. He raised a knife, his face twisted in a snarl, and charged me. A perfect opportunity. I could have dodged him easily. I could have disarmed and disabled him before he got within 10 feet of me. But I didn't. I just stood there, my eyes locked on Isabella's face through the car window, watching it drain of all color. Schlick! The sound of the blade tearing through flesh was obscenely loud in the quiet garage. A searing pain erupted in my chest as warmth soaked through my shirt. I heard Isabella let out a blood-curdling scream. I looked at her, swayed on my feet, and then collapsed. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was her throwing the car door open and stumbling towards me, that eternally cold, proud face for the first time twisted in pure, undiluted despair. Perfect. I came to, choked by the smell of antiseptic. A sharp, rhythmic pain pulsed from my chest, but the wound had been cleaned and carefully bandaged. I opened my eyes. I was in the master bed, dressed in clean silk pajamas. Isabella was sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes red-rimmed, her face pale and drawn. When she saw I was awake, she flinched, then tossed the alcohol-soaked cotton swab she was holding onto a tray with a clatter. "You idiot! What were you trying to prove? You almost died," she hissed, but her voice trembled. Seeing her like this, trying so hard to be angry, was almost funny. "Not dead yet," I rasped. I tried to sit up, but a fresh wave of agony made me suck in a sharp breath. "Don't move," she commanded, instantly pressing me back against the pillows, her movements frantic with a concern she couldn't hide. I let myself sink back down, my eyes fixed on her face, so close to mine. Her makeup was smeared, and stray strands of hair clung to her cheeks. It was a messy, real look that was far more captivating than her usual flawless perfection. "Were you crying?" I asked. "No," she snapped, turning away quickly and scrubbing at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Who would cry for you?" I let out a low chuckle, which made the wound protest again. "Ouch! You think this is funny?" She whipped her head back around, her eyes glistening. "Help me get a drink of water," I said, my tone as casual as if I were speaking to a lifelong partner. She froze for a second. "Don't you have hands?" she muttered, but her body betrayed her words. She gently propped me up with pillows and then brought a glass of warm water to my lips, holding it steady for me. I enjoyed the service, the cool water soothing my dry throat. "Isabella," I said after I finished, looking at her flushed cheeks. I leaned closer, my voice a whisper only she could hear. "This wound you dressed, it feels like it's healing faster than it should." Her ears turned a shade of deep pink, and her breathing hitched. I watched her flustered eyes, a grin spreading across my face. "You think maybe you added a special ingredient?" I paused, dropping my voice even lower, making it seductive. "Like, say, love. You're shameless." Like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, Isabella shoved me back, her face so red it looked like it was about to combust from a mixture of fury and embarrassment. She glared at me, her chest heaving, but she couldn't form a rebuttal. She knew that in that garage, in the moment she thought she was about to lose me, the heart-stopping terror she felt was real. She hated me for forcing her to confront it, but she was more afraid of what might have been. Finally, like a balloon losing its air, she slumped onto the edge of the bed, her back to me. "Ethan, what do you really want?" Her voice was quiet, heavy with exhaustion and defeat. All her pride, all her defenses, had crumbled the moment I hit the ground. I looked at her trembling back and said nothing. The game was just getting started. Tonight, she wouldn't sleep. The only thing she would see when she closed her eyes was me, taking a knife for her, collapsing in a pool of my own blood. The seed I had planted had now become a vine wrapped tightly around her heart. Every beat would be a reminder of me. She was trapped, and she was never getting away. Julian Croft never expected to lose so quickly, so completely. Consumed by bitterness, he showed up at the villa again a few days later. No flowers this time. The gentle smile was gone, replaced by a cold, determined arrogance. He found Isabella and me in the living room, going over the quarterly report for the company, discussing our next move. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She was wearing a simple cashmere sweater, her hair down, her profile soft and focused. The domestic scene clearly infuriated him. "Isabella, how long are you going to let this con artist fool you?" He strode in and slapped a file on a coffee table. "I did a background check. He's an orphan with nothing to his name, but a bit of street fighting skill. He's using you." Isabella's brow furrowed. She didn't even glance at his so-called report. She just looked up at Julian, her voice cold. "You investigated my husband?" That phrase, "my husband," was spoken so naturally, so matter-of-factly. It was like a slap in the face. Julian froze. "Isabella, I'm trying to help you." "Enough," she cut him off, her tone colder than I'd ever heard it. "Julian, I must have been blind to ever think you were a good man. Now I see you for what you are. A petty, pathetic little person who can't stand to see anyone else happy." She stood, walked over to me, and slid her arm through mine. "My business, and my husband's business, is none of your concern. Alfred," she called to the butler, "show Mr. Croft out. And from now on, don't let this kind of trash into my house. It dirties the carpets." Julian's face went from red to white to a sickly shade of gray. He stared at me, his eyes burning with a hatred so intense it was almost tangible. All I did was smile at him and gently pat the hand Isabella had resting on my arm. At my touch, I felt the tension drain out her body. That night was the Thorn Industries victory party. Isabella drank a lot, intercepting every glass of whiskey the board members tried to shove at me. The same old men who once looked at me with contempt were now fawning, calling me Mr. Vance and praising my vision. When we got home, she was tipsy. After taking off her makeup and changing into a robe, she didn't go to bed. She sat on a lounge chair on the terrace, hugging her knees, silently watching the glittering city lights. I brought a blanket and draped it over her shoulders. She didn't turn. Her voice was raspy from the alcohol and thick with a confusion she could no longer hide. You know, Ethan, I never really had a home. My father only ever saw the company. My mother died when I was young. And my grandfather, he only ever had expectations for me. I thought that's what my life was supposed to be. A precision instrument with no room for error. I needed a partner from the right background, a polished gentleman like Julian. Someone from my world. She paused, then turned to look at me, her beautiful eyes shimmering in the dark. But then you showed up. You were like a wrecking ball, smashing my carefully constructed world to pieces. I hated you. I wanted you to disappear. She gave a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. But I think I got used to it. Used to having someone to fight with over the last piece of toast. Used to arguing with someone about business strategy in the study. Used to knowing that when I felt like I was about to break, I could turn around, and you would be there, her eyes filled with tears, her voice cracking like a lost child's. I'm scared, Ethan. I think I can't live without you anymore. In that moment, all the ice, all the pride, shattered, leaving only raw, trembling vulnerability. I didn't say any of the cliché lines about protecting her. I just reached out and pulled her into my arms, letting her rest her head on my shoulder. Her body was rigid for a second, then melted against me like a ship finding its harbor. Breathing in the cool scent of her hair, I whispered in her ear, "Then don't leave. Isabella, your world isn't a machine, and neither are you. From now on, your world has me in it." After that night, everything changed. When I woke up in the morning, the other side of the master bed was no longer empty. Isabella was sleeping soundly, her long lashes fanned out against her cheeks. When I started to get up, she stirred, blinking sleepily. Seeing it was me, she didn't flinch away. She just burrowed deeper under the covers and mumbled, "It's too early. 5 more minutes." She was like a kitten. Sometimes I'd hear crashing from the kitchen. It was her, trying to learn how to cook breakfast, usually resulting in a culinary disaster which she would then blame on the ingredients with a completely straight face. I started taking on a more central role at Thorn Industries. The old guard on the board, the ones who had been bleeding the company for years, I dealt with them one by one, using the dirty secrets I knew from the novel's original plot. Isabella's power became absolute. We stood together on the top floor of the Thorn Industries tower, looking out over the sprawling city. She leaned against me. "I used to stand here and just feel cold and alone," she said softly. "Now all I see is a beautiful view." Julian Croft didn't give up. In a last, desperate act, he conspired with Northlight Industries and a few of the board members I'd ousted to try and steal corporate secrets. I handed the evidence I'd gathered to Isabella. She read it calmly, her expression unreadable. Then, right in front of me, she dialed his number. I don't know what she said. I just saw that when she hung up, she looked dazed. I told him that for old time's sake, I wouldn't press charges, she told me, her eyes clear. But he has to leave Sterling City and never come back. I realized in that moment, the perfect image I had of him in my head had faded a long time ago. Maybe it was never real to begin with. She deleted his number, his contact info, everything. It was a final farewell to a past that had already rotted away. When she was done, she looked up at me and smiled, a genuine, relieved smile. The last thorn had been removed from her heart. I proposed to Isabella. No grand ceremony, no roses, no giant diamond. It was in the same study where we'd signed our original contract. I cooked dinner, and we opened a bottle of wine. "Isabella," I said, swirling the wine in my glass, mimicking her old, condescending tone. "Our contract is about to expire." She froze, a flicker of panic in her eyes. I smiled and took a small velvet box from my pocket, sliding it across the table to her. "I have no intention of renewing it." As she stared at me, bewildered, I got down on one knee and opened the box. It wasn't some massive rock. It was a pair of simple, elegant platinum bands. "I want to sign a new contract, a permanent one, with no termination clause." I looked up at her, at the woman who had completely captured my heart, and said with all the sincerity I possessed, "Isabella Thorn, will you marry me? This time, for real. No contract, just me." Tears began to fall, silent at first, then streaming down her face like broken pearls. She didn't say yes. She just threw herself into my arms, holding on so tightly it felt like she was trying to merge our bodies into one. "You're a jerk, Ethan Vance," she sobbed, pounding a fist weakly against my chest. "What took you so long?" A year after we were married, I drove her to a part of the city she'd never seen before. It was a rundown alley, the air thick with the smell of damp decay. "Why are we here?" she asked, confused. I didn't answer. I just took her hand and led her deeper into the shadows. "A long time ago," I said softly, "I had a very long dream right here. In the dream, I died in this alley, on a rainy night, like a stray dog." Her hand gripped mine, and her face went pale. I turned, cupped her face in my hands, and looked into her frightened eyes. I smiled. "But now," I said, "the dream is over." I kissed her, a deep, possessive kiss that erased all her fears. The sun broke through the alley's entrance, bathing us in warm, bright light. The tragic story of Ethan Vance was finished, but the story of Isabella and me was just beginning. Epilogue. Isabella's view. I had a long, terrifyingly real nightmare. In the dream, I got everything I thought I wanted. Ethan signed the divorce papers and disappeared from my life like a ghost. My first love, Julian Croft, returned from Europe, and we had the biggest wedding Sterling City had ever seen. He was handsome, attentive, and charming. The perfect husband in public. But I wasn't happy. After the wedding, Julian changed. He belittled my career, insisting a woman's place was at home. He burned through my money, surrounding himself with sycophants, using my name to advance his own ambitions. We fought constantly, and together we had destroyed Ethan. We used the cruelest methods to push him to the edge. I remember it clearly. A stormy night, a filthy alley. I watched as the men Julian hired beat him to death. He collapsed in a pool of his own blood, and the last person he looked at was me. There was no hatred in his eyes, just a vast, empty sadness. In that moment, something inside me died, too. After Ethan was gone, Julian showed his true colors, embezzling from the company, trying to sell its secrets. I was the one who sent him to prison. I was left alone in that enormous, empty mansion. I was the most successful woman in the city and the loneliest. Every night, I would wake up from nightmares, his face floating in the darkness. I'd remember him clumsily making me soup when I had a stomachache. I'd remember the quiet, unreadable look in his eyes when I insulted him. I realized, too late, that I had grown used to him. I realized that when I pushed him into the abyss, I had buried my own happiness along with him. At the end of the dream, I was old and gray, dying alone in that cold, massive bed, clutching a faded wedding photo of him and me. The regret was a physical thing, a tide that drowned me. "No!" I shot up in bed, gasping for air, my heart hammering against my ribs. A cold sweat soaked through my silk nightgown. The bedroom was silent except for my own ragged breathing. I looked around. It was the master bedroom. My bedroom. The moonlight was cool and pale outside the window. Everything was as it should be. It was a dream, just a dream. But the agony, the bone-deep despair, felt terrifyingly real. My head whipped to the other side of the bed. A figure lay there, breathing deeply and evenly. It was Ethan. He was sleeping on his side, the moonlight tracing the strong line of his jaw. The eyes that were usually so sharp and teasing were closed, his long lashes making soft shadows on his skin. He wasn't dead. He wasn't bleeding out in some alley. He was right here beside me, alive, breathing, real. The realization hit me like a lightning strike, shattering my fear. An overwhelming wave of relief and terror washed over me, so intense I thought my heart would burst. I stared at him, trying to burn his image into my soul. I never knew that just the sight of him, safe and asleep, could make me feel so anchored. The dream was still vivid in my mind. Julian's betrayal, Ethan's death, my long, lonely, regret-filled life. What if it wasn't a dream? What if that was my original fate? The thought was insane, but it took root in my mind and began to grow. I looked at Ethan, this man I had despised for 3 years, this man who had turned my world upside down in a matter of weeks. Slowly, my hand trembling, I reached out. I needed to touch him, to feel the warmth of his skin, to confirm he wasn't just a phantom born from my guilty conscience. Just as my fingers were about to brush against his cheek, he frowned in his sleep and rolled onto his back. My hand froze in midair. My heart skipped a beat. He didn't wake up. I pulled my hand back, clutching the sheets so tightly my knuckles went white. I stared at his sleeping face, and the icy fortress I had built around my heart for years collapsed into ruin. For the first time, I confronted a truth I had ignored for 3 years. Ethan Vance, my husband. Maybe I had never known him at all, and now I was just so incredibly grateful that I still had the chance. Leaning over, I placed the softest of kisses on his cheek. I curled up beside him, wrapping an arm around his waist, and soon fell back asleep. This time, there were no nightmares, only a sweet, peaceful dream. And